In the shadowed skies of Valaris, Kale felt a mix of excitement and fear as he prepared for his first magic test. His heart raced with hope, but everything changed when Eldrin's harsh words echoed in the crowd, leaving him humiliated and heartbroken. This moment sparked a fierce determination within Kyle. He silently vowed, "I will show them all that I can be more." As he walked away from Valaris, feelings of doubt and fear followed him, casting a shadow over his every step in this journey to prove himself. The skies over Valaris hung heavy with clouds, a dull gray that mirrored Kale's anxious heart. Today was the day of his first magic test, and he could feel the weight of anticipation in his chest, beating like a drum. As he stood among the gathered crowd, the whispers around him faded into a dull hum. His mind was a whirlwind of hope and fear. Would he finally prove himself? "Kale, are you ready?" his friend Lyra asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Her bright smile was a stark contrast to the gloom above. I think so," Kale replied, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked down, trying to steady his racing heart. "What if I fail?" "Everyone starts somewhere," Lyra encouraged, nudging him playfully. "Just remember what we practiced. You've got this." But as the moment drew closer, Kale could not shake the unease that gripped him. He watched as the other students took their turns, their spells weaving through the air with grace and power. Each flick of their wrists sent sparks flying, filling the air with brilliant colors. Kyle clenched his fists, trying to gather his strength. Then it was his turn. He stepped forward, the eyes of the crowd on him. Eldrin, the esteemed mentor, stood before him, arms crossed, a serious look on his face. "Show us what you can do, Kale," he commanded, his voice strong and unwavering. Kale took a deep breath, summoning every bit of confidence he had. He raised his hands, focusing on the energy within him. The world around him faded away, and he felt the magic begin to flow. But just as he was about to unleash it, Eldrin's voice sliced through the air. "Enough!" Eldrin's tone was harsh. "This is not magic. It's a mere flicker. You will never become a sorcerer." Kale's heart sank. The laughter and whispers of the crowd echoed in his ears, a cruel reminder of his failure. Humiliation washed over him like a cold wave, leaving him breathless. He could feel their eyes, judging and mocking. As he stepped back, his mind swirled with anger and disappointment. "I can be more," he vowed silently, the words burning inside him like a wildfire. "I will show them all." He turned away from the crowd, the weight of their rejection heavy on his shoulders. The streets of Valaris felt different as he walked away, each step a reminder of his inadequacy. Doubts crept in, whispering that he would never be enough. The fear of failure loomed over him, a dark cloud that matched the sky. What if he could not escape this feeling? What if he remained just another nobody in a world filled with magic? Kale clenched his jaw, forcing himself to push forward. He could not let this defeat define him. "There has to be a way," he muttered under his breath. His heart pounded with the fierce determination to prove himself, to rise above the shadows of doubt that threatened to consume him. As he left the familiar streets of Valaris behind, a new resolve settled within him. He would seek out the knowledge and power he needed. He would not be just a failed apprentice. He would become a sorcerer, one worthy of respect and recognition. With each step, he imagined the fire of magic igniting within him, a spark waiting to be unleashed. The path ahead was uncertain, but Kale was ready to embrace it. He would find a way to silence the doubts and fears that haunted him. He would carve a place for himself in the world of magic, where he could stand tall and proud. And in that moment, as the clouds slowly began to part, Kale took a deep breath, feeling the air fill with possibility. The journey ahead would be challenging, but he was no longer just a boy in Valaris. He was determined to become more. As Kyle walked away from Valaris, the weight of his humiliation still heavy on his shoulders, he found himself lost in thought. The forest around him seemed to grow thicker, the trees closing in as he ventured deeper into solitude. The soft rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds accompanied him, but their sounds felt distant, almost muted against the pounding of his heart. He needed to find a place free from judgment, a place where he could gather his thoughts and plan his next steps. After what felt like hours, Kyle stumbled upon a secluded glade, bathed in soft sunlight that filtered through the canopy above. The air was crisp, and a gentle breeze carried the sweet scent of blooming flowers. It was a perfect retreat, or so he thought. Just as he was about to step further into the clearing, he caught sight of a figure sitting against a tree. A woman, with long, flowing hair that shimmered in the light, was tending to a small collection of herbs spread out beside her. "Who are you?" Kale asked, curiosity overcoming his caution. The woman looked up, her emerald eyes narrowing slightly. "I am Alara," she replied, her voice steady but laced with a hint of distrust. "And you are not welcome here." Kale felt a wave of disappointment wash over him. "I didn't mean to intrude. I just needed a place to think." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'm Kale. I want to be a sorcerer." Alara's expression hardened. "Magic is not something to be taken lightly, Kyle. It can destroy as easily as it can heal." His heart sank at her response. "I know that," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "But I want to prove that I can control it. I want to show everyone that I am more than what they think." Alara remained silent for a moment, studying him with a cautious gaze. "What do you know of magic?" she finally asked, her tone softening just a bit. "Have you ever faced its consequences?" Kale hesitated, then spoke from his heart. "I've seen what it can do. I've been rejected because of it. But I believe it can be beautiful too. It can help people." A shadow crossed Alara's face, and she looked away. "Beautiful? Perhaps. But it ruined my life," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I lost control once, and it cost me everything." Kale could see the pain in her eyes, and it struck a chord deep within him. "What happened?" he asked gently. Alara took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I was young, eager to learn. I thought I could control my powers," she began, her voice trembling. "But one night, during a storm, I lost control. My magic hurt someone. It was an accident, but it changed everything. After that, I was alone, feared by those I loved." Kale felt a pang of empathy. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "That must have been terrible." "It was," she replied, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't let that happen again. I can't trust magic." "But I want to learn," Kale insisted, his determination flaring once more. "I want to become better. Will you help me?" Alara hesitated, her thoughts swirling in a storm of doubt. "Why should I?" she asked, her voice steady, yet laced with vulnerability. "What if you end up hurting someone too?" "Because I need guidance," he said, stepping closer. "I've faced rejection and humiliation. I need to turn that pain into something stronger. I want to make a difference." Their eyes locked, and for a brief moment, Alara saw the sincerity in Kyle's gaze. The vulnerability he displayed mirrored her own fears, and a flicker of hope ignited within her. "All right," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I will help you, but you must promise to listen and learn. Magic is not a game." Kale nodded vigorously, relief flooding through him. "I promise, I'll do whatever it takes." As they began to discuss the basics of magic, the tension in the air slowly lifted. In that quiet glade, surrounded by nature, two souls found a fragile bond. Kale shared his dreams, and Alara revealed her fears, both knowing they had embarked on a journey that could change their lives forever. As days passed in the secluded glade, Kale's training with Alara began in earnest. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wildflowers, and the overcast sky loomed overhead, casting a gray light over their sessions. Kale felt a mix of excitement and fear as he faced the challenges Alara set before him. "Focus, Kale," Alara instructed, her voice steady. "Feel the magic within you. Let it flow." Kale stood with his arms outstretched, trying to summon the energy he had felt only in fleeting moments. He closed his eyes, concentrating, but the magic seemed to slip away like water through his fingers. Frustration bubbled inside him. "I can't do this," he exclaimed, his voice strained. "I thought I could, but—" "Everyone struggles at first," Alara replied, her tone softening. "You must not give up. It takes time to learn control." "But what if I never get it? What if I fail?" Kale's heart raced with doubt, and he took a step back, feeling the weight of his dreams crashing down. Alara took a deep breath, sensing his turmoil. "Listen to me, Kale. Failure is part of learning. It does not define you. What defines you is your determination to keep trying." Their training continued, but each day brought its own set of challenges. Kale found himself grappling with his emotions as much as his magic. There were moments when he felt a spark of power, but they were often overshadowed by the fear of not measuring up. One afternoon, after a particularly difficult session, Kale sat on the ground, his head in his hands. "I don't know if I can keep doing this, Alara. I feel like I'm not cut out for magic." Alara knelt beside him, her expression serious. "What do you really want, Kale? You need to find that answer within yourself." Kale looked up at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "I want to prove myself. I want to show everyone that I can be a great sorcerer." "Then you must fight for it," she said, her voice firm. "But you also need to believe in yourself. Magic is not just about power. It is about understanding who you are." As the days turned into weeks, Kale began to notice a shift within himself. With every failure, he grew stronger. He learned to embrace his emotions instead of hiding from them. Alara watched as Kale transformed, his determination shining brighter with each passing day. Yet, beneath this growth, Alara felt a struggle of her own. As she helped Kale harness his magic, her feelings for him deepened. She admired his spirit, his passion, but the shadows of her past haunted her. Could she truly support him while grappling with her own fears of magic? One afternoon, during a training session, a sudden surge of energy filled the air. Kyle was practicing a new spell when it unexpectedly spiraled out of control. A burst of magic erupted, and Kale instinctively lunged toward Alara, pushing her out of harm's way. "Kale!" she gasped, her heart racing. They both fell to the ground, the magic dissipating around them. Breathless, Kale stared into her eyes, his heart pounding. "Are you okay?" Alara nodded slowly, her expression a mix of relief and surprise. "You saved me." "I didn't think. I just acted," he replied, still shaken. "But I couldn't let anything happen to you." In that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Their bond had grown strong through shared struggles and triumphs. Kyle's heart swelled with a new sense of purpose, and Alara felt a flicker of hope amid her fears. "I will keep training, Alara," Kyle said determinedly. "I won't let you down." Alara smiled softly, a warmth spreading through her chest. "Together, we can face anything. Just remember, you are not alone in this." As they resumed their training, a newfound energy surrounded them. Kyle's determination to master his magic was intertwined with his desire to protect Alara, and together, they began to forge a path toward greater strength. The glade, once a place of doubt, now stood as a testament to their growing partnership, a space where magic and emotions intertwined in a delicate dance. The sun had barely risen over Valaris when Kale received the news. He sat on the edge of a mossy log in the glade, the morning mist swirling around him like whispers of forgotten dreams. Alara was beside him, her eyes fixed on the ground, sensing the heaviness in the air. "Kyle," she said softly, breaking the silence. "You've been quiet since we heard about Eldrin. Are you all right?" Kyle looked up, his heart pounding. "I can't believe it. Eldrin is in danger. I never wanted this." His voice trailed off as the weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders. Alara turned to him, her expression serious. "You didn't mean to awaken that evil. You were only trying to learn. But now you must decide what to do next. This is bigger than both of us." He sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. "I thought if I became stronger, I could prove myself. But at what cost? I put him at risk." The thought twisted in his gut, a dark reminder of his ambitions. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the glade, Kale felt the pull of his past. He thought of Eldrin, his former mentor, who had always believed in him, even when others did not. "I can't just sit here while he is in danger," Kyle declared, determination igniting within him. "I need to go back to Eldoria. I have to help him." Alara's eyes widened. "Are you sure? It could be dangerous. You might not be ready to face what you've unleashed." Kale clenched his fists, frustration bubbling to the surface. "I am done running away from my mistakes. I have to take responsibility for what I've done. I owe it to Eldrin and to myself." A shadow crossed Alara's face, and she looked away. "What if something happens to you? I can't bear the thought of losing you, Kale." He stepped closer, his voice softer now. "You won't lose me. I promise I won't let that happen. But I can't do this alone. I need you by my side." Alara hesitated, her inner conflict evident. "I'm afraid of magic, Kyle. It has hurt me before. What if it hurts you?" Kyle reached out, taking her hand in his. "We've faced our fears together before. This time is no different. I can't do this without you." She searched his eyes, her heart racing at the thought of supporting him in a dangerous mission. Finally, she nodded, a mixture of fear and resolve in her expression. "All right then, we'll go together. But we must be careful. We can't let our emotions cloud our judgment." As they prepared to leave, a dark cloud loomed over Kale's heart. He couldn't shake the feeling that his choices would have dire consequences. He thought about the ancient evil that threatened everything he cared for. "What if my past choices lead to more pain?" he wondered aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara turned to him, her eyes fierce. "You cannot dwell on the past, Kale. You must learn from it. We can only move forward, together. Remember, you are not alone in this." He nodded, feeling a flicker of hope light within him. "Together," he repeated, the words strengthening his resolve. As they stepped out of the glade, Kale felt the weight of their mission pressing down on him. The path back to Eldoria was fraught with danger, and he knew the journey would test them both. Yet, in that moment, he realized that true strength lay not just in power, but in the connections he had formed along the way. The sun shone brightly now, illuminating their path as they set out. With each step, Kale felt a growing sense of purpose. He would return to Eldoria, not just to save Eldrin, but to confront the darkness that had emerged from his ambition. With Alara by his side, he was ready to face whatever awaited them, knowing that their bond was stronger than any fear or doubt. Together, they would rise to meet the challenge ahead. Kale's return to Valaris was shrouded in uncertainty. As he walked through the village, memories of his past filled his mind. The faces of those who had once looked down on him flashed before his eyes, igniting a mix of regret and determination. He could feel the weight of his actions heavy on his shoulders, knowing he had awakened an ancient evil that now threatened the very people he had tried to prove himself to. "Kale," a familiar voice called out. It was Eldrin, standing near the old oak tree that marked the center of Valaris. His mentor's expression was a blend of worry and relief. "You came back." I had to, Kale replied, taking a deep breath to steady himself. I made a mistake, and I need to help fix it. Eldrin nodded, his eyes scanning the village that had once felt so safe. The darkness is growing stronger. We need to prepare. Kyle felt a new sense of purpose swell within him. This was not just about proving himself anymore, it was about protecting those he cared for. What can I do to help? He asked, his voice steady. Gather the villagers, Eldrin instructed. We need everyone on board. They must understand the danger we face and how to stand against it. As Kyle moved through the village, he noticed the worried faces of the townsfolk. Children clung to their parents, and whispers filled the air. With every step, Kyle felt the eyes of the villagers on him, a mix of hope and skepticism. Why should we trust you, Kale? An elder asked as he approached, arms crossed tightly over his chest. You are the one who brought this upon us. I know I have made mistakes, Kyle admitted, feeling the weight of the elder's judgment. But I am here to fight for Valaris. I will not let this darkness take our home. His words hung in the air, and after a moment, the elder nodded, albeit reluctantly. Very well. We will listen. But we will not follow blindly. As the villagers gathered, Kale felt Alara's presence beside him. She had returned to Valaris, ready to face her fears head-on. We will need a plan, she said, her voice low but firm. Kyle looked at her, admiration swelling in his heart. Yes, and we work together. I trust you, Alara. Alara's eyes softened. And I trust you, Kale. We can do this together. With their plan taking shape, Kale and Alara laid out strategies to defend Valaris against the ancient evil. They knew they had to confront it head-on, but they also understood that they needed to harness the strength of the villagers. As they finished explaining their plan, Kale could feel a sense of unity growing among the people. They were willing to fight for their home, and Kale felt a thrill of hope. Let's gather supplies and prepare for battle, Kyle announced, his voice ringing out with newfound confidence. We fight for Valaris, for each other. The villagers cheered, and Kyle felt a warmth spreading through him. He was no longer the rejected apprentice. He was part of something greater. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the village, a chill ran through the air. Kale knew the time was drawing near. They would have to face the ancient evil soon. Alara, he said, turning to her with a serious expression. Are you ready? She looked deep into his eyes, her resolve shining through. I am. We must face our fears together. Kale reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. We will make it through this. I believe in us. As night fell, the villagers lit torches, their flames flickering like stars against the darkening sky. Kale felt a surge of determination. They would confront the ancient evil, and he would fight not just for himself, but for the bonds he had formed along the way. In that moment, he understood that true strength came from unity. As they prepared for the battle ahead, Kale felt the warmth of hope igniting within him, ready to face whatever darkness awaited. The air crackled with tension as Kale stood at the edge of the battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest. He had trained for this moment, but nothing could prepare him for the sight before him. The ancient evil loomed large, a dark shadow against the pale sky, its eyes glowing with malice. Beside him stood Alara, her hands trembling as she gripped her healing staff. Kale, are you ready? She asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. He turned to her, determination shining in his eyes. I have to be, for Eldrin and for us. Together, they stepped forward, the weight of their shared journey heavy on their shoulders. As they approached, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread washed over them. Kale took a deep breath, recalling all the lessons he had learned. Remember why we fight, Alara said softly, sensing his hesitation. It's not just about power. It's about protecting the ones we love. Kyle nodded. He thought of Eldrin, of the bond they once shared, and of the trust that had been broken. This battle was not just for himself, it was for redemption. Suddenly, the ancient evil let out a roar that shook the ground beneath them. Dark energy surged toward Kale and Alara, and they braced themselves. "Now!" Kale shouted, drawing on the magic within him. They unleashed their combined power, a brilliant wave of light and energy that clashed with the darkness. The impact sent shockwaves through the air, and Kale felt Alara's presence beside him, a reminder of their connection. "Keep pushing," she urged, her voice rising above the chaos. As they fought, Kale could feel his strength growing. Each spell he cast was fueled not only by his desire for power, but by the love he felt for Alara and the hope of saving Eldrin. He had finally found the balance between ambition and compassion. In the heat of battle, Kale spotted Eldrin in the distance, battling his own foes. The sight ignited a fire within him. "Eldrin!" he called, pushing forward against the dark forces. "We're coming to help." Eldrin glanced their way, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Kale, I knew you would return." The moment fueled Kale's resolve. He fought harder, channeling every ounce of magic he had learned. Alara stayed close, her healing spells keeping their strength up as they pressed forward together. "Together!" Kyle shouted as they faced the ancient evil once more. With a final surge of energy, they unleashed a powerful spell. Light burst forth, illuminating the darkness and forcing the ancient evil to recoil. Kyle could feel the magic swirling around him, a force of unity that transcended their individual powers. As the light engulfed the ancient evil, a deafening silence followed. The darkness began to dissolve, leaving behind only a whisper of smoke. Kyle and Alara stood panting, their bodies exhausted, but their spirits lifted. "Did we?" Alara began, her eyes wide with disbelief. Kyle nodded slowly, a smile breaking through his fatigue. "I think we did it." They turned to find Eldrin approaching, his expression a mixture of pride and astonishment. "You two fought bravely," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You have grown beyond what I ever imagined." Kyle's heart swelled at the words. "I wanted to prove myself to you, Eldrin. I am more than just an apprentice." Eldrin placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "You are a true sorcerer now. I see the strength in you, not just in your magic, but in your heart." Tears of relief and joy welled in Kale's eyes. He had finally found acceptance, not only from Eldrin, but within himself. As the three of them stood together, the weight of their journey pressed upon them. Kale realized that his path had never been about power alone. It had always been about the connections he forged along the way. Alara stepped closer to Kale, her eyes shining. "We did this together, you and me." He nodded, their bond stronger than ever. They had faced darkness and emerged not just as warriors, but as friends. In that moment, Kale understood that true strength came from love, trust, and the bonds they created. As they looked toward the horizon, a new beginning awaited them, one filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. Share this story if you believe that love and friendship can conquer even the darkest challenges. Leave a comment about a time when support from loved ones made all the difference in your life, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales like this one.